And I am here with Garry Cahill. He is the Davis Cup captain for Ireland and a coach of several Irish players, including Conor Niland and Sam Barry, who is a practice partner here at the World Tour Finals. We'll start off with this, Garry. How was Sam chosen as a practice partner here?
We got a call from somebody from the ATP who was looking for a player of his level to be on site, and yeah, we just took it from there.
And how long have you been coaching?
I've been coaching 20 years. I started coaching quite young. Before that, I played, but I went into coaching quite young. Yeah.
Okay, and you were telling me you're the Davis Cup captain for Ireland, and you work with Conor Niland. What else do you do?
I'm responsible for our national academy, which is based in Dublin in one of the universities, and we have training programs for players from 10 years of age right up to professional level. So I'm responsible for that program. My Davis Cup role is only for a few weeks in the year. So we play group stages. So we play 3 weeks max in the year. So it actually doesn't take up such a big part of my time.
So which player of yours is here right now? It's Sam Barry.
Yeah, Sam Barry is here right now. Yeah.
So I observed on the practice court. One thing that people may not know much about is what role does the practice partner play in a situation like this?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the day. If a player is going to play a match on a chosen day, then the warm-up is very specifically for a match, normally 30 minutes. If it's not a match day, then it can be whatever the player wants to do. In some cases, they may want to do something more specific that could have been a problem the day before, or it may be to play a set. It depends, and we're very much at the disposal of the players, in this case.
So when you say match day preparation, working on something specific, do you mean maybe a pattern of play or something like that?
Yeah. So for example, Rafa yesterday felt he was working very much on trying to get the ball high on the backhand, and he was in the practice putting a lot of balls in Sam's backhand and serving a lot of wide balls to his backhand. So yeah, I think he was in that situation practicing that, and also he wanted to practice his wide serve on the juice side. So it was quite specific yesterday.
And usually pre-match, it depends on the player, of course, but is that something they end up practicing a lot, is different patterns of play based on the opponent they're going to be facing next?
It's funny because in the match warm-ups, we never did that. And the match warm-ups were very much, 20 minutes up the middle of the court just to get some rhythm, and volley warm-up, serve warm-up, and some returning warm-up. But none of the match warm-ups have been very specific to the match so far.
Now, you mentioned Rafa. Who else has your player hit with?
Yeah, he's hit with Almagro. He did a practice session and played a set with Almagro, and also with the Bryan brothers.
Okay, and when you're on the court, I know you have lots of experience. When you're on the court while your player is practicing, what are you trying to do out there? Are you going over technique? Are you perhaps giving some other kind of advice?
Yeah, it was a bit different this week because it was his first time to do something like this. So I spent most of my time trying to give him confidence and trying to keep him relaxed, because I know he was very nervous when he hit with Almagro for the first few minutes. So I was trying to make him feel that he was good enough to hit with these kind of players, and more to give him confidence. But then as the practices went on, we started to work on a couple of different things. Like, for example, one of the big differences was the intensity and the tempo that he was hitting with compared to what he normally has to practice with. So we had a goal that it was okay to miss long, but never to miss balls in the net. So he was trying to increase the tempo of his ball all the time. And then also to improve his intensity, his goal was to run every ball down, and that his legs must move all the time.
How did he feel after that practice with Rafa?
He was pretty tired after the practice with Rafa. When Rafa asked him to serve, he was delighted. He was tired. It was, it was only in the middle of the court, but it was really, really intense because Rafa's ball is so heavy that it pushes you back, and you're dealing with this kind of pressure from a ball that you're not used to dealing with.
Yeah, and how does a player, I spoke to him and he said that Rafa's his weight of shot was immense. How does a player adjust to that exactly?
Well, the way he adjusted to it is we talked about taking a step further back, because when you try to stay in on it, it rebounds off the court so fast it's really difficult to time. So he had to take a step further back, and I suppose what you don't try to do is try to do things that you're not used to normally doing off his ball, because it's so difficult. Like, it's so difficult to step in and attack off his ball, for example. So I think a step back, and also to really focus on trying to accelerate your racket, because if you don't accelerate your racket with Rafa, the ball won't go anywhere.
So you do go over a little bit of technique, though, at least on the practice court. What's the difference between training during a tournament and training sort of in between periods?
Yeah, well, during a tournament, a lot of the training will be based around the matches. So, for example, if you have played a match, you may want to go to the practice court that evening to try and work on some things from the match. If you know your opponent the next day, you may do some tactical training based around the opponent. It's not very often technical training in the tournament week, unless there's something that is causing big problems. Then you can't avoid to address the technique. But you would try as much as possible to focus on the mental, the tactical, and then from a physical point of view, it's really about trying to keep yourself in good shape, make sure that you're looking after your body properly, all those things.
How much physical conditioning can somebody get in during a tournament season?
I think it depends on the tournament. If you're playing a peak tournament, I think you're only able to do light maintenance. If you're playing tournaments that are not so important, I think you can train through the tournaments. Of course, it's becoming the norm now to have a physical trainer in your team, if you can afford to have a physical trainer in your team. But if you can, I think there are certain amounts of training you can do. So, for example, if you go on a 3-week tour to Futures and you lose first round on the first week, you have 7 days, 6 days to train. So you can get a lot of your physical work in then. But you can't do things like strength training, the night before a match. These things are not going to help your game. But I think you can train a lot physically during tournaments, yeah.
Well, and that kind of brings up an interesting question, too, because Rafa was talking about not really having a lot of time in between tournaments to actually hit the practice court. So when a player is on tour, even if they're playing maybe on the challenger level, how exactly do they, if they're playing a steady schedule, how exactly do they have time to improve anything if they're always in competition mode?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's trying to find that balance. I had an experience with one of the players where their schedule was like 34 weeks, and when we reduced the schedule to 25, I think it was down to 24, 25 weeks, the results were so much better, because we took a week and a half in between all the time to get the right kind of training done, which is also very difficult to do at a tournament, because you don't always have the court space, you don't always have the requirements you need, like your baskets, things like this that you need in a training environment. So it's not easy to do.
Well, we're here at the O2 Arena in London, and it's a pretty nice environment. But there are hundreds of players on the Challenger and the Futures level. It's not so much of a glamorous lifestyle. What are some of the realities of playing on that level and trying to make your way up to maybe the top 100?
This is a completely different ball game. The reality is there's no glamour. It's slumming it. It's roughing it. It's staying in not such nice hotels, if they're even hotels. It's completely different game. But I think once the player understands that, that's the beginning of the path, and this is the reward, that they need to have something like that in their mind if they're going to be able to do that. I had a very interesting conversation with a snooker player the other night. He was world champion in snooker, and we were speaking about this, and he was saying that when he was coming through the ranks, he had to sleep in his car. He had no money to buy food, but his dad was always telling him that, look, you've got to do this. There's no other way. You don't just arrive in the top 10. So I think you have to educate the players that that's all part of it. I think for independence as well, that it's very important that they do it. And they don't always have a coach, because you can't always afford to have a coach, but they have to do a lot of these things by themselves as well.
So talking about quality of, maybe of skill, of what would be the difference between maybe the players in the top 100 and pretty much everybody below?
I think between 100 and 200, the players are quite similar. I think that, from my experience, that players between 100 and 200 can make top 100. I I think most of them, if they do the right kind of work. I don't think there's that much difference, but I think like at 600-700 there's a big difference. Consistency is probably one of the biggest differences. You know, the number of unforced errors that these kind of players make in comparison to the players that you're seeing here. The matches are won and lost based on unforced errors, not based on winners. The athletic ability. I mean, all of these guys here are fantastic athletes. They all move so well. I think you don't see this with players of. Okay, there are exceptions, but they always have other holes. If they move really well, they can't serve, or they can't hit a forehand, they can't hit a backhand. But you need to be, I think, a phenomenal athlete. I think you need to be really consistent mentally and consistent within your game. I think you need to have very good racket head speed, very good tempo. I think all these things are really important, and they separate the top 100 players from the ones that are in the futures circuit, I think.
Speaking to some of the people here, there seems to be a bit of a problem with getting people, especially kids, involved with playing tennis. Is that the same in Ireland? How is Tennis Ireland struggling with perhaps getting that going, getting junior or kids active in the sport?
Yeah, I think it's similar to other countries in Ireland. We have Gaelic sports, hurling and football, and they attract most of our talented athletes, if you like. Tennis is down the scale, although tennis is getting bigger in Ireland because we've recently started to have some success. We had 2 players in the main draw US Open for the first time, so we're having some success. We have a bigger profile than before, but it's still difficult to convince kids and parents to get into tennis.
How many players would you say do you have at the National Academy?
We have 40 players in the National Academy. That ranges from youngest, which is 10, 11 years of age, right up to, Sam, Conor, these kind of players. We couldn't cater for any more. It's not such a big facility, and our budget is small. We have a very small budget for our national training program. So that's our max, really.
Okay, just to wrap it up, is this your first time, being a coach of a practice partner at an event like this?
Yeah, I mean, as a practice partner, yes. But I mean, obviously, I've been on the tour with some players in, slams, and so it's different. This is much different than a Grand Slam. Yes, my first time with a practice partner here. It's as I said, it's different than the Grand Slam experience.
Well, we talked about what Sam learned from this experience. What can you take away from this?
I mean, I can take away probably 1 or 2 things that, I may have thought about before, but they weren't so clear in my mind. Like, for sure, being up close and looking at the athletic ability of Rafa and Novak and players like this, I mean, I take that home, that it's just so important that the right kind of physical work is done all the way through the stages of development with the players. The professionalism of these players, in comparison, go back to like the futures players, and the professional of these players is just completely different level. But I suppose they can afford to surround themselves with people who make it easier for them,
Well, and I have to ask this question. Who do you think is going to win the tournament?
It's a good question. I mean, I think Roger's playing unbelievable. But I don't know if you can play unbelievable every day, the whole way through the tournament. I think it'll be Roger or Novak. I think Roger.
All right. Well, thanks for chatting with me. I appreciate it.